are gang-related in about 10 cities across the country. Not excusing it, there's other underlying factors associated with it. Now, let's get into what our position is, those of us that believe in the Second Amendment. We fully acknowledge that when you have liberty, that you're going to have sometimes undesirable outcomes. For example, there are 50,000 people a year that die in auto fatalities, and it's tragic. However, no reasonable person would come up to the mic and say, let's ban driving.
True. The one thing I disagree with, though, is that the primary intention of a firearm is to kill something.
Well, not necessarily. That's interesting. The primary intention of a firearm is actually to protect what you love. The primary intention.
I disagree with that.
That's okay. So let's actually, the firearm is a technology or a tool that is actually intention neutral, right? So a firearm could be used for sharpshooting, or it could be used for no different than a kitchen knife could be used for cook a beautiful meal, or to murder somebody. So it's a piece of technology, albeit it makes killing easier, but it in itself is not inherently what you might think it is. Now let me just finish the point though, is that we as enthusiasts of the Second Amendment acknowledge that in a free society, people are going to do bad things and dumb things, but there is a price to liberty. And this is a mature viewpoint that we lost during COVID. During COVID, as a country, we said, we don't want liberty, we want safety, and everybody stay at home 15 days to slow the spread. And how many of you guys wanted the lockdowns to end after like 2 weeks, right? And so what we get at though with firearms is that we acknowledge that there will be unnecessary deaths. We acknowledge that, and we want to try to limit those. We could talk about that. In a culture that believes that owning a firearm is a right, not a privilege, our goal is to be about limiting the suffering, acknowledging that you're not going to get rid of it completely. It's a completely different viewpoint than the European model.
In other words, it's a question of, do you want freedom and liberty, or to be ruled over by an incessant nanny state like was in the UK? Unfortunately, it seems a lot of Americans do enjoy being the nanny state, being subjected to the rule of dictators and tyrants, or mini dictators, whatever you want to call it. I think an important stat to bring up that Charlie Kirk hasn't mentioned is that look how many defensive uses of firearms there are in the United States. In fact, a government estimate by the CDC, Center for Disease Control, which we all know is very left-wing, said that an estimated at least minimum of 500,000 people a year will use a firearm in some kind of defensive manner. Not necessarily firing it, by the way. I mean simply brandish it in order to de-escalate the situation. I think that really says something about the Second Amendment, just how important it is for protection. Also, as far as the statistics go with suicides and that kind of thing, there's a statistic about it. It's going to apply to you, of course, and I think that's something that's important to acknowledge, and it's not lost in these kinds of discussions.
The final point I'll say is, why do you think we believe it's a right? It's because we believe that God forbid, if the government ever becomes tyrannical, we need an ability to defend ourselves against a tyrannical government. And please, your thoughts on this?
Yes, absolutely. So there's two things I want to touch on. The first is being the context of the Second Amendment during its creation. Obviously, the Constitution was written in 1776.
And in 1787, and the Bill of Rights was 1791. Okay, yeah.
Anyways, so back then, an experienced shooter on a musket could fire 3 shots a minute. On average, it took 30 seconds to fire 1 shot. Nowadays, AR-15s, traditionally, if it's a stock model, holds about 30 rounds in a magazine. Now, you can customize that and make it carry more sugar, but the statistic is that these AR-15s can empty this 30-round magazine in 5 seconds. Is the possibility.
So totally correct. The question is, what was the founders' intent when they put the Second Amendment? For example, to play out, and I'm not trying to pick on you, but for example, you say the founders only want or thought that, okay, musket, Second Amendment. Did they only think First Amendment, parchment and paper? I'm sorry, rephrase. If the Second Amendment was only intended to cover muskets, is the First Amendment only intended to cover letter writing, not talk on the internet?
That's a good point. Here's the thing:
these principles transcend technology, and that's where we come from. Is that you have a First Amendment right whether you're speaking freely on a message board or you're talking like the founding fathers would. You have a Second Amendment right whether it's a